Nick Vince here. This week on the Chattering Hour, I'm joined by our executive producer, Chris Rowe, and we discuss some of our favourite moments from Season 1, and we reveal January's guests from Season 2. For almost 25 years, Chris Rowe Management has been a successful boutique talent agency based in Los Angeles. Some of their clients have included New York Times best-selling authors, Oscars, Tony, Emmy, Grammy, and Golden Globe Award nominees and winners. Up next on the Chattering Hour, Chris Rowe. To the Chattering Hour, and this our final episode of Season 1, and I'm delighted that I'm joined by the producer of the show, Mr. Chris Rowe. Hi, Chris.
Hello, Nick. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you very much.
Hanging in there?
Yeah, I'm hanging in there and looking forward to lots of Christmas cake and Christmas pudding and so on. Christmas, basically. Just Christmas. I'm looking forward to Christmas.
So am I.
So, thank you. I mean, you are the man behind this all. Basically, you created the Chattering Hour. Perhaps you'd like to share with our viewers how it all came about. What made you suddenly decide, I know what I'll do is I'll start setting up a show where Nick gets to chat with people.
Well, a long, long time ago, when I was but a child and I saw HELLRAISER, I knew that one day I would want to do something with Nicholas Vince. Well, you know, it actually kind of spawned out of the pandemic because months, weeks of just being bored, you kind of go, well, what am I going to do? I want to do something. I've thought for a while about doing a show like this. The whole idea was to do a show that was showcased around my clients.
Right.
And I have a lot, and I thought, you know, we can totally do a show that kind of showcases them in a way that's really good and positive. Most importantly, professionally done. And so originally that was the idea, and I had spoken to a few people about it, and I thought, well, what makes this different than the others that exist out there? And I found that there wasn't much. It was just kind of boring. And then, so I suddenly looked to, well, what have my clients done that I can kind of exploit that and make it interesting? And of course, genre fans, great following, and certainly I have enough clients to do that. And that's when I started to mold it together. And when I started to think of hosts, you were the only person that I ever thought about, to be honest with you. What you had done with your previous show, I thought was fantastic. You had done it for a long time, and I don't know, I just think there's always something better when Brits speak, and so it just sounds better. And so I went, Nick, we need to do this.
Yeah, and I remember just thinking, this is so, you know, such a cool idea. And I was particularly pleased because I think with our first guest, I was very lucky to chat with Malcolm McDowell.
Yeah, well, you know, the thing about Malcolm is he's the greatest storyteller. Malcolm could read the newspaper and make it exciting. And so I love his stories. Now, of course, being Malcolm's manager, I've heard all of these stories. I've heard these stories more times than I can even begin to count. But I never get tired of hearing them because they're always exciting the way he delivers them. And for those who don't know Malcolm, he's the funniest person. If you really get to know him, he's the funniest person that you'll ever meet. I mean, he's a total jokester. And so it just felt right to kick off the first episode with him. And it was an incredible episode because we really got to dissect his career in an hour and 15 minutes which wasn't enough. We didn't even get to the Rob Zombie questions, unfortunately, but we really did get to cover a career that spanned over 50 years and still going really strong.
Yeah, I think what I really liked particularly was when we got towards the end of the episode and he was talking about Truth Seekers, the Amazon series that he just finished filming with Simon Pegg and Nick Frost. Um, and it was just his enthusiasm for it I really loved.
Well, Truth Seekers came out just a few weeks later.
Yeah.
And you had already at that point, you'd had a chance to see some of the episodes. So you had a feel for what it was like, what it was going to be like. I think you got to see the first 5 episodes.
Yeah.
And so it's a fun show. And it's Malcolm doing what he does really well, which is not scaring people. It's comedy. People don't realize the last 10 years of his career, it's basically been comedy. He did a television series for TNT called Franklin and Bash. It was a comedy. He did that for 4 years. Then he went to Mozart in the Jungle for Amazon. That was a comedy for 4 years. Then there was about a year lag, and then he went straight into Truth Seekers. And now we're waiting to see if there's going to be a season 2. But he was excited about it. And who wouldn't be working with Nick Frost and Simon Pegg? They're an incredible team. They're wonderful guys. And, Malcolm got to know them. I think also what was fun about the show for Malcolm, which he may not say just in casual conversation, but knowing him personally, he got to spend time in London. Malcolm doesn't live in London anymore. Malcolm hasn't lived in London since 1980. And so, he goes back occasionally to do a movie or some kind of a press engagement. So he's in and out in 3-4 days or a week. He got to spend several months back there. And I think that was a great thrill for him because he got to see so many people that he just normally doesn't get to see. And because he had said to me one time, he said, I really don't have a lot of friends left that I grew up with and was close to. And this gave him the chance to really reconnect. So along with a really good experience of just being in London, plus shooting the show, he was really excited about it. And it comes across in his conversations, even to this day when he's doing press.
Yeah. And it's for fun. It's a really gentle thing. As you say, I've seen the first 5 episodes. Haven't had a chance to watch the last 3 because it's 8, I think, in the season. So, that's from my couple of weeks off over Christmas. That's one of the things I'm really looking forward to, sitting down and just finally catching up with. The other thing I really liked about Malcolm was chatting with him, was him talking about his son's album. When I asked him what one of his favorite music albums was, he chose an album by his son, or his son has been working on recently. I thought that was really interesting. I hadn't realized his son was doing that. But the other thing is that he mentioned Bath Olivers, chocolate Bath Olivers, as a luxury item that he'd like to take with him. And then literally a week later, the New York Times published an article to say that they'd stopped making them. But I've just done the research, and apparently Huntley and Palmer's, the guys who make it, have said that this was overstated, and the fact that it's more to do with COVID and difficulties with supply. And I was like, I've always heard of Bath Olivers. I don't think I've ever tasted one, but now I really want to go out and buy them.
Well, the one thing about Malcolm, anytime we've traveled around the world, before he ever gets on a plane, before he even says yes to the movie, the first question is, what city or what country are we shooting this in? And, when I first started to represent Malcolm a long time ago, I always found that to be such an odd first question. And then I realized it was all about the food. He wanted to know what city he was going to be in or what country. And he would say, oh, no, boring food. I don't want to go there. So Malcolm has an appetite for food. He loves it. And why shouldn't you? There's some great food out there.
Yeah. And our next guest on the show was the lovely Kathleen Kinmont, who, it was great because she just published a book, an autobiography. Well, it's kind of an autobiography. It's a series of articles and so items during life based on the idea of life lessons. Wonderfully titled, I Should Have Been Nicer to Quentin Tarantino. It was fascinating to learn the story behind that. How long have you known Kathleen?
I've known Kathleen for, I would say, at least 14 years. Probably going back to 2006 is a good guess. 2006, maybe 2007. Kathleen is one of the most generous, kind, loving human beings you'll ever meet. There is something about Kathleen that is just unlike what you find. She isn't fake in any way, which you tend to find in Hollywood a lot. If she asks you questions and she's engaging in the conversation, it's because she's actually interested in what's happening. And I love that. And I love her. And she's been doing this a long time, a long, long time. And she's a genre favorite. Fans really like her. So I was really pleased to have her. And of course, the book is fantastic. It's very personal, and it really covers, her life in a way that you probably wouldn't know. Going all the way back to going to school with Quentin Tarantino, and yeah, it's a life well lived, and I think she has a lot more of great things in store for her. I mean, she's been filming for the last couple months on a new show, and she's a wonderful person. She's a wonderful mother, and loves her family and her friends. Can't ask for anything better than that.
Yeah, I mean, I loved her stories about Donald Pleasance having a little red cup on set.
Yeah. Well, honestly, that's what makes these interviews interesting, really, is when you get to find out all those little details that you would never know. I mean, you would never know. The general public, press, they're not on set for these incidents and or occurrences. And so to hear the guests talk about it is really, really great. And I know that Kathleen has some good stories. Malcolm's got some whoppers. And unfortunately, we didn't get a chance to talk about sword fighting with Oliver Reed and a handful of other stories, Robert Shaw, raging alcoholics. And so there are some stories there to be told. That's for another show.
That's another show. Oh, well, have him back on any time. I'm trying to even think which film he was in with Oliver Reed. But
it was a movie. It was a movie, I believe, called Royal Flash.
Oh, right. Yeah, that makes sense.
And then he did a movie called Figures in a Landscape with Robert Shaw. And there's a great story where Robert Shaw has a brand new Rolls Royce delivered, and within weeks he completely totaled it because he was drunk, completely totaled it, and then had a new one delivered again. It was no big deal. It was, I'll just get him another Rolls Royce. Robert Shaw trying to get Malcolm to get in the car with him while he was raging drunk. And Malcolm was like, "No, I don't think so, darling. I'll walk."
Yeah, I think it was one of the things I do like. It is, as you say, finding out all these fascinating stories I hadn't heard before. I think with Kathleen, I think it was the process for Bride of Reanimator in terms of getting the live cast done. No, I mean, I had a live cast done when full body live cast done when I was doing Chatterer, but what Kathleen went through was an awful lot.
It was a great process. And if you get a chance, it's hard to find, but if you get a chance, there's some great photos of her having the process done. Unfortunately, most of the photos out there are really low res, so you can only see just small images of them, but it's pretty gnarly to see. I mean, in a way, they're doing exactly a Frankenstein. They're piecing her together bit by bit, layer by layer, is pretty fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think what I found particularly interesting was the conversation I had with her about the movement, how she got the, how she got the role to begin with, but also the actual movement in Bride of Reanimator, and so on. Yeah, no, as you say, a fascinating lady. And from her book, I learned the meaning of Namaste, which means I recognize the divine in you as you recognize the divine in me. I just, yeah, absolutely, which kind of
Absolutely.
sums up Kathleen.
I mean, not everybody gets to be impaled with a shotgun on a wall. And,
Yes.
that I remember seeing that scene in Halloween 4 when I was young, going, oh my God, how do they do that? I mean, that's been the big thrill for me, is I grew up with so many of these people, never thinking one day that I would be their personal manager, that I'd be running their careers, I would be running their business. That's the trippy thing, because I grew up watching Hellraiser. I grew up watching Malcolm and Kathleen and so many of the folks that we've had on. So 15, 20 years to get to have a friendship with them and get to know them in a different way is quite incredible. Back a long time ago when I was doing journalism, I had done an interview with Mariette Hartley. And Mariette Hartley, it was actually an interview for Star Trek, because she had done the original series. And she wrote me this lovely note, and she said, "I'm so sorry for this being late. It was a press kit she was sending me." She goes, "Here's some photos. Here's bio. Hope we get a chance to talk again. It was a lot of fun. Love, Mariette Hartley." Well, fast forward, I represent Mariette Hartley now. And it was really kind of funny because I was going through some things during the pandemic. Actually, the closet door opened and all these boxes fell out on top of me. And all of these papers fell out. And one of the papers that fell out was that note from Mariette Hartley. I did that interview probably back in 1995. And there it falls out right there. Is this note from Mariette Hartley, and I represent her. And it's so crazy because, I showed it to her and we had a good laugh. So that's been the big thrill, I think, for me, just getting to do this, is not only like I know them, I know their personalities. The general public, maybe not. Most people don't know that Malcolm is incredibly hilarious, but he is. Most people don't know that, Kathleen is just this incredibly kind, giving person. I mean, you just want to have a conversation with her all the time. She should have been a therapist, really. Meg Foster and Tracy Lords and all these folks. So it's so for me to get to know them in a different way is always a lot of fun. Which, of course, I know the answers to all the questions that we put together. That's why a lot of the questions are, there's some kind of off the wall questions there, but of course I know the answers because I have that inside scoop.
Well, you just mentioned Tracy Lords, and of course, Tracy was who I've met on a couple of occasions, and she's just, again, another sweet, warm, lovely lady. I remember talking to Tracy and talking about stories I'd not heard of before, was how she got prepared for Blade, and that they walked them through this tunnel so that they could get covered in blood, which I thought was fascinating. I just thought, yeah, of course, that's the most sensible way to do it.
Walk in one end completely dry, walk out the other end completely drenched in blood.
Yeah. How, again, when do you remember when you met Tracy?
I do sorta remember when I met Tracy. Probably was maybe 8, maybe 9 years ago. And my thoughts of her at that moment, because I remembered her immediately when I met her, I went, oh my God, Blade. I remember her in the Tommy Knockers, because I'm a big Stephen King fan. I remembered Tracy from Roseanne. She had a recurring or a show. She popped on Roseanne a few times. And of course, Crybaby. I mean, we all watched Crybaby there in the early 90s. Not of This Earth. If you're a Roger Corman fan, you certainly know that. And getting to know Tracy has been one of the great, wonderful things that's happened to me, because we've become incredibly good friends, and I love her dearly. And she is the absolute utmost professional. I mean, it doesn't matter where she goes. It's like that saying that Joan Crawford used to say, if you want the girl next door, go next door. She never leaves her house without looking fabulous, 150% fabulous. It doesn't matter. It's going to the grocery store. She looks fabulous. But she's a fabulous mother. She loves her son so much. And you see that, and it's just beautiful. She's an absolutely wonderful wife. She loves her husband. She loves her job. She is such a professional. And I got to work with her. I directed her in a project a couple years ago called A Tale of Two Sisters. And it was kind of, it was a black and white homage to the great films of the 40s, early 50s, noir films. And she was my first thought. There was not another person that I had in mind for that role. I wrote it with her in mind. And the idea I had come up with about 7 years earlier, but finally we got it written in 2018. But she, and everyone thinks, oh, it's comedy, but she's so much more than that. And she's a really good dramatic actress as well. So she's fabulous, creative, and 100% business. And maybe one of the only people that I ever got intimidated by on set, because she has a presence and it's 100% confidence. So she totally is there. But a couple times I got a little intimidated because I thought, oh my God, how am I going to get her to do this scene when this is not a scene that she's going to enjoy doing this way? She's not going to enjoy being not attractive. She's gonna push back on that. She's not going to enjoy doing it this way. But then you just have to kick in and you have to go, well, I'm the boss. But she was great, and I loved her, and I'd work with her anytime. You saw the film, you saw
Yeah.
the book.
I really enjoyed Tale of Two Sisters. I think one of the other things I really enjoyed about doing this show is the fact that is my film watching lists. I've watched dozens of films now in preparation for talking with people, and one that really stays with me is Excision. You were talking about Tracy as a dramatic actress. Extraordinary performance. I'd not heard of the film before. It's way out there. And she is just amazing. You're talking about being a mother. The way she plays this mother is amazing, amazing. So I was really pleased to actually get to,
To see
watch that and have a chat with her about, the filming of it and how she got the part, etc.
that was the first movie that I ever saw her, I think, in a serious, dramatic way. And I went, oh my God, this woman really can act well if given the opportunity to do so. In Hollywood, it's all about the opportunity. You can be a fantastic actor, but if you're not given the opportunity to do it, then you just kind of hang in limbo waiting. Christoph Waltz told me once, he said, there's two things you have to have, every actor, and it really applies for almost any profession, but you have to have opportunity and preparation. And the opportunity, that is not up to you as the artist. That's not up to you. That just knocks on the door whenever it knocks. But the preparation is up to you. And you need to be prepared. You need to be ready. And, Tracy was totally prepared to do that. And it was probably the role that I saw her in that I went, whoa, she can really go there. Because up to that point, it had predominantly been comedy,
Mm,
kind of campy uh, uh, things that I'd seen her do. Not that I hadn't seen her do other dramatic things, but with Excision, she got a chance to really show it. Um, I had Malcolm McDowell in that movie, and that's why I ended up seeing the movie, was because Malcolm had a small cameo in there. And when they called me and they told me that Tracy was cast as one of the leads, I didn't represent Tracy at that time, and I had met her, and I knew her a year or two before that, and I thought to myself after reading the script, wow, that's an interesting choice. But that's kind of all I thought. It
mm,
was not negative. It was just, oh, that's an interesting choice. Then I saw it at Sundance Film Festival, and I was like, whoa. Because to get to see it on a small screen is one thing, but when you really see it on a big screen, it's really incredible, because
mm.
visually at times the movie's really gorgeous. So yeah, she's fabulous, and Excision is pretty out there. As I've always said, I don't love it, I don't hate it, but it's somewhere right in the middle where you're always drawn into it. And when I say I don't love it, meaning it's not a movie I could watch over and over and over again. Um, but I like it, and it's a bizarre film.
Yeah, it's a very, and as I say, interesting. The performance of the other one. Funnily enough, one of the other things that I watched, and it's worth tracking down if you can, and is the Tales of the Crypt that she did way, decades ago. Um, and again, it's just a very small. In this instance, it was a very small part, but she absolutely nailed it. Um, and she has so little material to work with, but you know exactly what is going on in this woman's mind. I think she's only in for about like the first 5 or 8 minutes but it sets up the episode, and it is, absolutely extraordinary how much she manages to convey in just those few moments. And
Yeah.
again, somebody else, again, preparation, she trains and so on. Our next guest was somebody who you have known for many years, a gentleman called Daniel Kraus.
Yeah, Daniel and I went to the same school together. We grew up in this little town uh, in Iowa called Fairfield, a little farm community. It was about 11,000 people. Um, Now I live in California, and there's 11,000 people in 4 block radius. But uh, after George Romero died, I represented George for 15 years, up until his death. After George passed away in July of 2017, you've got to start the business process rolling after you take some time to grieve. And so I started looking at properties. I started looking at different things. And one of the things that I had remembered working on, and George had started, was a book. George had started working on a novel right before he had his stroke in 2009, early 2010. And so he stopped, and then he got back with it. And it was a deal that I put together originally with a publisher in New York, and it was a really good deal. And George just wanted to write it on spec, take his time and do it, not be, restrained by the publisher. Well, I knew that was a mistake, because George was a great procrastinator. So I knew this was going to take forever, and it certainly did. But so I dug out what he had done, and it was originally just titled The Living Dead. And it was incredible. I kind of re-examined it again, and we looked at it, and I said, I think we should try to get this book finished. And so Daniel, I had reached out to. I knew Daniel and reached out to him, and we hadn't really spoken for many, many years. And I I knew he was a really big fan, a big fan. And he had done work for Guillermo del Toro. They'd collaborated several times. He also had written a couple of really good books. So I knew his writing style, which was really important because when two different writing styles collide, you can have a big problem. You see that sometimes in cinema when you have two directors for a film. Every once in a while, you'll go, that was an odd way of doing that. And it's because two different styles. That'll work for an episodic, but that doesn't sometimes work for a film. Same thing for writing. And boy, Daniel sat down and he worked on it and came up with a sample treatment for the rest of it. And George's wife, Suzanne, and I looked at it, loved it, and said, let's go shop it. And we did. And that became The Living Dead. And it's an extraordinary, in-depth, super long book. If you like long books, you'll like this book. I think it's 765 pages. But it was wonderful, even after George's death, to see something come to life that he had been working on. And Daniel did a wonderful job. And so it was great to have him on to talk about the book.
Yeah, it was really. So the reason I'm laughing at the length of, when you mentioned the length of the book is I just remember I was reading it and I just wasn't getting through it fast enough. So then I got the you gave me the audio version of it. Great, I'll just listen, because that's also narrated by another of your clients is one of the narrators.
Yeah, Daniel and I talked about who should be the narrator, and there were several people that were supposed to do it. One particular fell out, which I was pleased about, and it gave me the opportunity to suggest Bruce Davison, who of course is a really phenomenal character actor. He's won a couple Globes, Emmy and Oscar nominated. And he's done audiobooks. He has a great voice. And when Bruce sits down to do something, he really does it. He just doesn't read it. He performs it. And he did a fabulous job. The publisher was really thrilled with it. Suzanne was really thrilled with it. And I wish, honestly, he'd read the whole book, because I think that is a perfect example of keeping the consistency with the same reader. I think would have been the best way to go with that. That being said, it's good. Laurie Cardill, who had worked on Day of the Dead with George, is the other reader. And Laurie's fabulous. She has a magnificent voice. But there's a difference. She kind of just reads it, whereas Bruce performs it. And I think it would have been great to just have the performance all the way through.
Right. Yeah, no, I remember discovering that on Audible that you can actually speed up the rate at which you're listening to the book. And there were some stages I was listening to it at 4 times the speed, just so I could actually make sure that I got this listened to entirely. By the time I was actually getting to have a chat with Daniel, who's a lovely guy, he's a really, really nice guy. And I was able to share with him one of the moments that I really like in the book is that he managed to sneak in some of the plots to George's films, disguised as stories within the book. Another, our next guest is another artist, well, an actress who's become an artist, a visual artist, and that's Nancy Loomis, who John Carpenter films, had some great stories and so on. How long have you worked with Nancy?
I've worked with Nancy, I think, for 16 years. It would have been 2004, maybe 2005, but I think it was 2004 is when we started. And Nancy, if I need a therapy session in tranquility, there's 2 people I will call, Nancy and Meg Foster. Those 2 are just so zen, and Kathleen, we'll add Kathleen to that list. She's incredible. And what was great about Nancy's interview is there were stories in there I've never heard, which is really great and really exciting for me to hear something I haven't heard before. But it was really great to hear her talk about those early days and John Carpenter's process, and really how they were just a big family in a way, a big group of people who just got together. Everyone did something in order to make it. And it's always great to hear. Again, it's kind of on the inside of how it works, which we don't always hear. John Carpenter's spoken about it, but it's nice to hear it from a different perspective. And what can be fatal is when both have a different recollection. It's a stark difference to contrast to what. But that it didn't happen that way. What are you talking about? But that wasn't the case in this. But she's a great storyteller, and she's a fabulous artist, and she's a really good friend. I love her. And she was our Halloween edition, and one of two for our Halloween edition. And she's a good friend. She's a good person.
Yeah. One of the moments I really liked talking to was listening to her describe how, as I say now, because she's moved on to doing visual art. In fact, she does 3D sculptures using found objects. And I've seen photographs of these things, and these things, they stand about as tall as me based on the photographs of them. And she said, and she doesn't use glue. They're all held together with bits of string, or they're slotted into one another. And I just think there must be an absolute nightmare to transport because you kind of get the feeling they look so fragile. So I think I published a few of the photographs in some of the assets that we used to publish the show. And if people haven't seen them, look for the art, the sculptures of Nancy Loomis, because they look amazing.
They are. Her work is incredible. I remember I went to her home, maybe 5 years ago, and it was around Christmas time. And she had one of the most incredible Christmas trees I have ever seen, ever. And the entire tree was made up of ornaments that she had made that reflected what was going on in the times. And she had made out of newspaper clippings and different things, decorations of Nelson Mandela. I think he had just passed away. Martin Luther King was in there. I think Obama was in there. Just different things that had been in the news. It was incredible. She went somewhere, and I'm taking pictures of it, and I still have them. But I'd never seen anything like it. It was absolutely beautiful. And I don't know whether you could replicate that tree. Like, it is a one-off. I don't think making mass production of what she created, I don't think it would work. I really don't. It was this one-off piece of art that I said to her, I said, I hope you don't take this down. I hope you just kind of put it in the corner and you just leave it up for a long, long time, because it's pretty incredible. And that she is. She's quite an artist.
Yeah. Our next guest was somebody with an extraordinary career, Courtney Gaines, and he had some amazing stories. One of which one of my favorites was his experience of working on colors with Dennis Hopper, and the story of how he got the part, but also how he suddenly ended up by singing a song and getting a music credit on the film. The fact that he was playing an LA gang member, and that he was the only, he was the white guy with the red hair. And I remember watching this and thinking, that looks really incongruous. And he's saying, yeah, but he grew up in that area, and he had a friend. He based his performance on a friend who was Caucasian and had beautiful red hair.
Yeah, it was funny. I actually, about a week ago, I was watching Colors. It was 1 a.m. I was working on the Chattering Hour. I was working on a script for someone and putting questions together, and I put it on. I haven't watched it in some time, but I watched it, and there's this scene of this group of guys coming down this hill, and you just see that one of them in the distance is like, is he wearing a red hat? And he's like, no, that's Courtney, that red hair. But he did. It was a great performance. It was a nice, really supporting performance. I happen to find that interview I know Courtney very well. Courtney has been a client since, I think, 2004, maybe 2003. And we're really good friends. And Courtney is at my home for birthdays, Christmases, Thanksgivings. He's been there. His birthday is the same day as my son's, and so we're like it's like a family. Uncle Courtney's coming over. I mean, he's always been there. He's been a good supporter and friend. But I found him to be incredibly generous with his stories. I've known him for a long time, and I've never heard him be so personal before. And we spoke about it after the interview, after I watched it. And he said, he goes, I watched the interview as well. And he goes, there was something really inviting about Nick. I felt really comfortable talking to him. And he goes, I found myself talking about things I've never talked publicly with anyone. I've never discussed in an interview with anyone. And afterwards, he was like, wow, it's almost in a way like a therapy session, how you feel when you leave a therapy session. And he talked about things, and it comes across in the interview because it's really, really personal. And he's a great guy. And of course, Malachi from Children of the Corn was the role that really, threw him on the scene. And he's had a great career. I mean, up to this point, for all the years he's worked in the business, there's a lot to be proud of. But that's actually one of my favorite interviews of all the ones we've done, because he was so personal, and because, again, he shared stories that even myself, I had never heard. And that is largely because of you. The person who's doing the interviewing, if they're asking ridiculous questions or they're boring, you just want to get it over with. It doesn't matter if you know each other. In your case, you're very inviting, and you ask the right questions, and you have the right tone, and it really makes a difference. And there's other people throughout this first season who have said the exact same thing. So
thank you very much. I think this is one of the things that I've enjoyed most about the season so far. Well, the season, and then some of the upcoming interviews that I've already done for our next season, is that I'm really hoping that actors and directors and writers are actually watching and listening and learning from these, because people have been incredibly generous about talking about the realities of the business. And not just it's tough, you're going to have to struggle to get jobs, or you need a second job or something. But actually, I think, again, what I found so touching about Courtney's interview was that honesty about what he was going through at a particular time after he'd basically become exhausted, and the lack of support he got from his fellow actors because they just couldn't comprehend what was really going on. So yeah, no, I really love the fact that people are being so generous with their time and honest in their answers.
Sure.
It reminds me that Courtney's audition for Malachi and Children of the Corn was quoted by our next guest, which was Jonathan Breck. They were talking about Jonathan was talking about his audition for Jeepers Creepers. And I'd not heard this story before. I'd not heard Jonathan's audition process.
It's pretty trippy.
I found the video of it on the YouTube video of it online. People watch the show, then go and watch the video that Jonathan refers to in the interview, because it's quite extraordinary. That is definitely not how I would ever approach it. Well, yeah, I couldn't.
Well, you'll find they do things a little differently here in America. You know, I remember being told one time, true story, of an actor who was auditioning for a role, and it took place in medieval times, that he walked into the room in a suit of armor, and he buried an axe in the desk of the producer, and the producer pulled out a revolver and told him to get the fuck out of his office. You know, stories like that, you just go, oh my God. Courtney with Children of the Corn, pulling that knife out and looking at all of those casting directors. Courtney has a dead stare anyway, so it really worked. So to have this guy come up and start sniffing around your neck and doing the things that Jonathan did was, you know, it gives you chills thinking about it.
Yeah.
I'm sure some casting director out there who has experienced some really bizarre stuff will probably write a book, or maybe they have, about crazy auditions that they've experienced. Because I, you know, being a manager here in LA, I hear about some really crazy stuff. You know, casting directors who, you know, they're the reader, and all of a sudden the guy just jumps out and grabs them. I mean, there was one where the actor, actually, I think it was one of my clients, well-known clients, grabbed the casting director and kissed her as part of the audition. She was like, what the fuck are you doing to me? Don't you ever do that again. This is back in the day. But my point is, it's, you know, people who get into it, they're creative, and they do some pretty crazy things.
Yeah.
That was before the city was ravaged with STDs and all of this stuff that exists now. You wouldn't dream of doing such a thing now. But yeah, Jonathan's got a pretty good story.
Yeah, and again, a lovely guy. You know, I've been lucky enough to spend some time with him up in Scotland and done a few shows with him. It's just a great sense of humor.
Another client for 17 years.
Wow.
17 years for Jonathan. It was 2003.
Wow. Wow. Well, I think our next guest isn't a client of yours, and that's John Cassia.
John is not a client of mine. I wish that he was. I love John. Of course, who didn't grow up watching Tales from the Dark? Sorry, John. Tales from the Crypt. They watched Tales from the Dark Side too, but then went to Tales from the Crypt because it was a little more animated. But John's great, and he is an incredible talent that, quite frankly, has never really gotten what he deserved. As a predominantly a voice actor, you don't really get seen. They just hear you, and sometimes you don't even know who's doing it. Thank God for Tales from the Crypt kind of making him this household name. But he's an incredibly funny guy. He's incredibly intelligent, and I really enjoyed listening to him talk about, you know, like his favorite films, and because some of his favorite films, they're my favorite films. And for Christmas, and as a thank you gift, in the interview, he talks about Clockwork Orange being absolutely one of his favorite films that he would take with him. So I sent him a Kubrick deluxe Blu-ray box set and a limited edition art print signed by the artist and Malcolm as a gift. And he sent a picture of him holding it. He was completely over the moon. But what a great man. I mean, he's an incredibly funny man, totally animated. And what a great story. I mean, his mother and father are Syrian. Was it Syrian? And
It's either Syrian or Iranian, and I'm just trying
Well, I
to.
think one was Syrian and one was Iranian, I think. I mean, it's an incredible story about the Baltimore.
Iraqian and Syrian. Father
Yeah,
from
yeah.
Iraq and mother from Syria. Yeah.
It's incredible. And you grew up in Baltimore, and basically just said, I'm going to do this. And but that's how it starts. It starts when you're young. You start playing make believe and doing voices and doing all of those things. And John's incredible. I think he's great. I would have loved to have seen John's career as an actor in front of the camera really take off, because he's really good. And
Well,
probably one of my favorite, probably one of my top 3 favorite interviews of the entire season.
well, the thing, what I, you were talking about, who didn't grow up watching Tales from the Crypt. Well, of course I didn't, because we really didn't have it over here. It was not broadcast. I'd heard of him and I'd seen snippets and I knew who he was. I was aware of the comics. Funnily enough, we'd had the comics over here. We didn't have the TV series over here. But what I found fascinating talking to John was also his stage career, and the fact that, he'd done the three guys naked from the waist down, the play about being stand-up comics, and how, as you said, this led on to the fact that he had a career in stand-up and wanted a TV thing and so on, but also things like Reefer
Star
Madness, the
Search.
musical.
It was
Yeah.
Star Search that he won, right? I
Yes.
believe.
Yeah.
I think he beat out, was it Sinbad?
Yep.
For Star Search. I mean,
Yeah.
he's a funny guy.
Yeah.
In fact, as you know, every year I throw a Christmas party, holiday season party, and can't do it this year because of what's going on. But I really wanted to have him come, because I just wanted everyone to be able to see him and talk to him, and you never know who's going to be there. And I really, really wanted to just get him to just sit down and talk more, because he's a lot of fun.
He is a great deal of fun. One of the stories that I remember most from the season was and that was one told by Amanda Weiss, about being told by Brian Dennehy, saying that the filming of Silverado was a very rare thing because there was such a feeling of camaraderie on the film. And I just thought, oh, yeah, that's really interesting story. And Amanda, again, I had so much fun talking with Amanda.
Amanda is she's a delight. Amanda isn't a client. I've known Amanda for a long time, and we always are running into each other or something. But Amanda, she's really good actress, and I think, oddly enough, I really remember being scared watching Nightmare on Elm Street, her opening scene in that. I mean, from the time you see her running through the boiler room, waking up, you're going on a ride at that moment. But the scene that scared me so much when I was a kid was the scene where Robert Englund's character, Freddy Krueger's arms are really long, and he stretches out like 6 feet on each side, and he's scratching the sides of the wall. It terrified me. And then, of course, she's hanging from the ceiling, and it was intense. And I would remember always covering up with the blanket. But I loved the movie, but I couldn't watch that scene. But she was fantastic in it. I wanted her to be in it more. For Amanda, it was the exact same conversation. We chatted after the interview, and she said, again, really honest interview, really personal interview. And it's great when you can get actors to be like that. And people out there are probably, what, they're not honest when they talk? No, of course they're honest when they talk, but it's, you take them to another level, discussing things that maybe they wouldn't normally discuss. It's really about comfort. Sometimes you can go off and do a movie, and it can be a horrible experience. I mean, you know, I've heard horrible experiences working on The Exorcist, William Friedkin, and then you've heard great stories, but they don't always tell the horrible stories about working on that movie. And some people don't care to, but then suddenly you'll get people who will start to open up and they'll start to talk about it, and then you learn something that you didn't learn. Sometimes you end up going, wow, that director's a real jerk. You know, and Amanda, she was, you know, I thought it was a really open, honest interview, and really happy to have her. And she's
Yeah,
a
I,
delight to be with.
I think one of the things that's really interesting, and it kind of came out in court, it was a comment Courtney made, but also Amanda, was being very aware of what roles are available to them and what they should be doing in the at particular stages of their career, which led to us talking about Hallmark Christmas romance movies. And I have to thank Amanda for now watching at least a half a dozen of these things because I'd never seen one. And it's
Well,
like,
good luck with that.
it's like, oh, this is what you're always talking about. I had a great chat with her about. So,
Oh, every once in a while, one will come along that'll be pretty good. Kathleen Kimmont did one a year ago. I think it was actually, it might have been Lifetime,
mm,
um, but it was really good. But some of them, they're just cookie cutters. It's the same. It's the same sort of thing over and over and over
it's
again.
the same plot. It is literally the same plot, and it's just like, oh yeah, okay. But yeah, that's again another fun interview. Somebody who I found incredibly enthusiastic, incredibly friendly, and that was Brad Greenquist from Pet Cemetery. It was a real joy. He was talking before, before we started the actual recording. He's just so lovely to meet you, and so he was just really, really fascinating. And again, somebody who was willing to share insights, not just like meeting with Stephen King very briefly on the set, but all because he's now got a big career as an acting coach
Yeah.
in Los Angeles.
Brad is he's an absolute gentleman, and he's total professional. And I like Brad. I always have. And you know, for those people who are fans of the original Pet Cemetery, um, the only one that I consider, uh, uh, the, his character Pascal, it stays with you the
Mm,
entire movie. I mean, even though he gets killed early on, of course, his character just keeps returning. But again, another one of those films that I remembered watching, and it's scaring me constantly. His character constantly scaring me, and I I liked the process because it was kind of like the character in American Werewolf in London who dies, and you just every time you see him,
mm,
he's rotting more and rotting more and rotting more. And again, uh, I think I saw that movie maybe the first time I was on a band trip with my high school band going to Florida, and they had rented some VHS. A bunch of people brought a bunch of VHS movies, and we were watching it on the bus, and I was kind of horrified by what I was seeing. But it was brilliantly directed by Mary Lambert, who is such an incredibly gifted director. And artist. She too is an artist like Nancy, and you know, I just think it's, you know, one of Mary's just best pieces of work, and I was so glad to have Brad be a part of it, just to tell the stories, and he's a pretty charming guy. I
yeah,
love the interview.
yeah. Another very enthusiastic guest was Daniel Roebuck. Such a nice man, and also it was so nice to meet a Hellraiser fan.
Daniel is the ultimate fan himself. I mean, he has such an incredible collection of memorabilia going back from when he was a little kid. And that's when it starts, right? It
Yeah,
starts when you're a little kid. And I think that Daniel, I've known Daniel for years. I'm really happy to have him as a client. And uh, it's just, you know, I grew up watching him and everything. And I remember my parents watching Matlock, and I remember watching him in Matlock. And then I remember, of course, The Fugitive and U.S. Marshal, and of course, then he's become Rob Zombie alumni. But you know, I see Daniel bouncing around Burbank all the time. You know, in the grocery store, walking down the street. I mean, actors do live normal lives. At least they try to. And Daniel's one that fits right in. I mean, he's just, you know, you see people stop, stare at him in the store. They pull out their phone and they start, you see people doing this, you know, because they're going, I know who that is. He's a great guy with wonderful stories, really about how you make it in this business,
Mm.
and the trials and tribulations and everything in between. And yeah, one of the great joys was going to Daniel's house and just looking at his collection of stuff. He's got so
Oh,
much. You know,
I mean,
Planet of the Apes, there's Planet of the Apes mannequins and all kinds of stuff, which is great because I have that stuff too. I mean, I have, you know, original Planet of the Apes costumes, and I have dresses, and I have all kinds of stuff that, you know, here at the house. People come in sometimes and go, what the hell is all of this stuff? But it's, you know, it's the world we live in.
yeah, no, I have to say one of my favorite moments in any interview is when we both discovered. Oh, I'm losing this because I'm on Zoom. Can I? There we are. This book that I'm trying to show. I guess it's green. It's going to go off against the green screen. But the book that Daniel has got 4 copies of. It's been
I
sitting on
know.
my bookshelf.
After your interview, I checked. I went, well, I want that book. I want that book. And I found one for like $250.
And I swear I remember talking to somebody else about that book as well. It's extraordinary.
Well, it came out at the right time. I mean, you
Yeah.
know, for those of us, you know, who grew up in the 70s, and you started to see all of the books that came out on, you know, Planet of the Apes, and just all of the great movie makeup stuff. Dick Smith, you know, really started to forge a name for himself at that time. Rick Baker in the early 1980s really emerged. I mean, I remember watching Rick Baker in the making of Thriller, being completely amazed. I had seen American Werewolf in London. His work is incredible. So yeah, that book is just pretty sensational.
It's a really fascinating book. Our next great, you were talking about films scaring you and so on. I remember the film Black Christmas when it first came out. The poster disturbed me because it shows Lynn Griffin, our guest, basically wrapped up in plastic. And we got a chance to talk about that. But I remember seeing the film when it first came out. But honestly, what a lovely, lovely lady she is.
Lynn is absolutely, you want to hug her. You just want to run up and hug her. She is so sweet and so charming. The first time I met Lynn was in, I think I was in Ottawa, Canada, maybe Montreal, at an event. And I just kind of looked and I was like, oh my God, that's Lynn Griffin. Now I knew Lynn from Strange Brew. I used to watch that when I was a kid all the time. And it used to be on HBO, and it used to just play over and over and over again. And then I discovered Black Christmas, and I think Black Christmas is maybe one of the most terrifying holiday horror films. I really do. I think it's incredibly eerie and creepy, and you know, the remake not so much, but you're right. That poster with Lynn dead with a plastic bag tied around her head. There's something that's just visually disturbing about that in the time of year that's supposed to be love and cheer and giving. And I later saw Lynn in one of my favorite Stephen King projects, which was A Storm of the Century. She played a character named Mrs. Kingsbury. And I loved the whole premise of that project, being off on this remote island, cut off in a horrible blizzard. I mean, it's so Stephen King, takes place in Maine. And, you know, she was great. It was a really nice supporting role. Lynn's a really talented woman. And I had purchased from Lynn one of these incredibly gorgeous crocheted blankets that she makes. And she flew into Los Angeles, and I met her in a Denny's parking lot in order to trade off. I gave her the cash, she gave me the blanket. It was like a drug deal. But she and her husband, they're lovely and charming, and she's one of Nancy Loomis's oldest friends. And so that was a lot of fun, just to hear Nancy talk about Lynn, Lynn talk about Nancy. And yeah, really happy to have her. I felt it was really important to have some kind of holiday horror theme for December. And it was really nice to have Lynn to kick that off with Black Christmas.
Yeah, and I think what was nice about our next guest was Stephen C. Miller was kind of on the other side of the camera, because Stephen's the first director I've spoken to in the show. And again, we were talking about Silent Night, but again, a fascinating story from how he started out as a kid with a big camcorder on his shoulder and, you know, pressing play, knowing that he couldn't possibly edit this, so kind of thinking, okay, well, then where have I got to move the camera next, and so on. I thought that was really interesting.
Stephen is really, he's a fabulous director. I booked Malcolm into Silent Night, which was kind of the loose remake of Silent Night, Deadly Night, in 2012. And the producers had reached out, and they were looking for someone like Malcolm for that part. I was on set. It was shot in Winnipeg, which at the time was a pretty depressing city to shoot in. I think it still is, but sorry, Canadians. But it was, you know, like a lot of film work was happening there. And Malcolm had just finished a movie, and he called me and he said, "Oh my God, darling, I'm so glad to be getting out of here. I can't wait to go home." And I said, "It's been that rough?" He goes, "Oh, it's just, you know, there's really nothing here." And I said, "Oh, well, boy, do I have some news for you." And he went, "What?" I said, "I got you another job." He goes, "Oh, good. I just can't wait to get out of here." I said, "Well, you're not going anywhere, because it's literally the next film that you're going to start 5 days after the project that you're working on now ends." And it went silent. And he said, "Well, see if you can get me the same room so I don't have to move." And I did. I got him the same room, got him everything, and he just stayed up there. He didn't even come back to Los Angeles. He just stayed. And it was fascinating, because half the crew that he had just worked with, he was working with again on Silent Night. And Stephen couldn't have been a better director. He totally knew his stuff. And to this day, Malcolm has said he would love to work with him again. Loved him. I saw him on set. I thought he was totally 100% there and excited, and showing everyone that he could do it and do it well. And I think it's a great film. It's supposed to be campy. You know, I heard someone say something about the movie. It was negative, and they said, you know, "Oh, it was, you know, it wasn't even scary." I went, "It was supposed to be camp horror. You do understand there's a difference in movie." And I think it's great. And what has happened is, it's, as the years have gone by, it's gotten more and more of a following. And it's fun. It's a fun
It's just
movie.
fun. Yeah.
It's not supposed to be an Oscar contender.
No. It's just, you know,
And by the way, the person who said that to me about that movie made one of the most awful pieces of garbage I've ever watched. So I think it was incredibly low budget and it was horrible. He thought he had made Lawrence of Arabia. It might have been Lawrence of Arabia garbage, but Steven's film was just fine. I enjoyed it a lot, and he's a great guest. And he's gone on to work with some incredible talent. Bruce Willis, Aaron Eckhart, Stallone. I think you're going to be hearing from Steven for a long time.
Yeah. And again, just another very honest and really fascinating guest. He really knows his craft and was able to communicate how he builds a scene. And we were talking about the violence and so choreographing the violence in 2 different films. I thought fascinating.
Well, he does well. He choreographs action scenes really, really well. And they're very well covered. Everything from hand movements to the feet to the, whatever it is, close up. He's really good at doing that. But he's also an editor. And I think that makes a really big difference. George Romero told me, that the best directors are editors. George started out as an editor, and he was a really good one, because when you're directing, you're cutting it. You know exactly what you want, where you want to cut it. You know all this in your mind, and Steven does that very well.
Yeah. Now, our final guest of this first season, continuing with the Christmas theme, of course, was Chris Sarandon. It was fast again. And I have to say, I got a little bit awestruck talking to Chris Sarandon, because he's been in two of my all-time favorite movies, and that's Fright Night, but also Dog Day Afternoon, apart from A Nightmare Before Christmas. And it was really fascinating to listen to him talk about his preparation for Dog Day Afternoon, but also the fact that it kind of reflects his story as being an outsider.
Yeah, Chris is an incredibly charming man. He's also a really good actor. And he did a couple of things that they're always going to be here. Fright Night is just one of those films. I watched it so much growing up. Of course, played the detective in Child's Play, and you look at The Nightmare Before Christmas, and what that movie has become is absolutely unbelievable. I mean, there's merchandising of every kind that continues to come out every year. Disney has made an absolute fortune off of that. And I hope that Chris has continued to be compensated properly for it. It's a little trickier when you're just an animated character. But his voice is used all the time for different things at Disney. But I just remember the funny story about Chris. I remember watching Fright Night. I remember my grandmother coming in and seeing it. And she stopped, and she never watched that sort of stuff. And pretty soon she just sat down, and she was drinking her coffee, and she just didn't leave. And I didn't say anything because I thought it was cool. And then, when he started to turn at the end into this, horrible vampire, she hung around, and it ended. And she said, "Oh my God, that man is gorgeous." And I looked at her, and she said, "I wasn't quite thrilled with what he turned into in the end, but she goes, I just had to stop and watch. God, what a beautiful man." And then she got up and she walked into the other room. And that was kind of my first memory of him, or anyone talking about him, was my grandmother stopping as she was walking through the living room to stop and see this man on the screen. Chris comes from Greek heritage, so do I. And so it was just great to hear about his story and his life. And of course, his first wife was Susan Sarandon. And, what a great career, stage, film, and TV. And really happy to have him, and really for our Christmas edition, our Christmas episode, I can't think of a better guest to have,
Yeah.
because literally his fans are of all ages. I mean, from the tiniest of the tiny to the oldest of the old, they're all there. People love The Nightmare Before Christmas. People love Fright Night. People love Child's Play, Dog Day Afternoon, Just Cause, although he got cut drastically in that movie. But first class guy, and really happy to read his memoir when he gets it.
Yes, yeah, I was just going to say the same thing. I think will be an absolutely fascinating book. Well, we're run over a little bit on our time. That's not the first time that's happened, but
No,
perhaps you'd
not
like
at all. Not at all. I'm the one sitting back, usually going, well, this is really not the chattering hour. You know, maybe for season 2, we'll change it to, you know, the chattering time.
Yeah. Perhaps you'd like to share with our viewers who our next guests are.
Yeah, I'm really excited about our lineup of guests for January. We're going to go on break for 2 weeks. And then we'll be back on the 14th. And I'm really pleased to say that Lynn Shea will be joining us. Lynn is just, what a career this woman's had. She's absolutely, I mean, if you want to call her a scream queen, you can call her a scream queen. You can call her whatever you want to. But she's really turned into the ultimate female force of nature and horror. I mean, and what a great career. Her comedic timing is brilliant. You look at films like Something About Mary or Kingpin, and you just go, oh my God. She wasn't even the lead, but she had the most memorable scenes. So super happy to have Lynn on the 14th. Of course, Insidious franchise and all that she keeps doing. This woman keeps working all the time. Our guest on the 21st will be director Tom Holland, who of course made Fright Night
and Child's Play. Yeah.
He did Stephen King's Thinner, which I happen to love that movie very much. I know some people have been critical of it, but I thought it was a great movie. He also did Stephen King's The Langoliers. But he also had a really successful career as a writer. I mean, he wrote Psycho 2, which I thought was a very good sequel, and a hard thing to do. I mean, you got to be really careful when you mess with a franchise like that. It's kind of the Holy Grail. As the others went on, not so good, but I thought 2 was really a solid movie. The Beast Within, you know, a really gifted writer. So super, super happy to have Tom to talk about his really long career. And then the very next week on the 28th will be Darren Lynn Bousman, who, of course, was the director of Saw 2, 3, 4, the new Saw film, Spiral, The Devil's Carnival, Repo, the Genetic Opera. He has a new film out that's his most recent, that's called Death of Me. And it's a pretty trippy film. I remember when Darren went to Thailand to film this, and I'd kind of forgotten about it. And it came out in October. So that's our lineup for January, already working on February. I think it's going to be a rootin' tootin' good time. And I think we have some really fabulous guests that people will really enjoy hearing from. I'm particularly excited for Lynn. I've watched it. I watched them all, but there's something about watching it again when it comes out. I can't wait to watch it again.
Yeah. Again, all 3 of them are really fascinating. And again, very generous with their time and honest with their stories. It's going to be fun. It's going to be fun.
Yeah, and I just can't say enough thank you to you for all of your hard work. You do an absolutely magnificent job every week, and I appreciate it. At this point, I don't have any more hair to lose, so if I get stressed out, I don't have my eyebrows, those I have to worry about. I'm going a little grayer, But I really can't thank you enough. It's been a fabulous season. Want to thank our associate producer, Jared Friedrich. He's been absolutely fantastic. Amanda Rome, who does all of our PR and social media, and Craig Berman for doing all of his hard work, and the others who really participated in this. So a successful first season, and on to season 2.
Mm.
A lot more chills and thrills, and we might even have some of these guys from season 1 come back for season 2 for something special, because some of them we just didn't really get to finish, and really, like, we just ran out of time, because that's what happens when you have a lengthy career.
Yeah. Well, and thank you, reciprocated thanks to you, Chris, because what people don't know is you kind of mentioned, but basically I get this wonderful list of questions. I get my film list to watch, but I also, as you say, you put together the questions, and I'm really, really grateful. That's what helps. You are the wind beneath my wings,
Well, I
basically.
try. I try. I try to be a strong breeze for you, so you can just glide and glide and glide. But truly, I think the other thing that I really want to do is thank everyone who tunes in. I've had multiple people come up to me, a few people on the streets in Burbank these days, that know me, and they'll come up and they'll go, "Oh, Chris, I just watched the most recent episode of the Chattering Hour. It's really great." That's a great thrill, because you don't know who watches it. I have no clue, and there are some who really enjoy just watching it. Some, they listen to it, as a podcast. So thanks to all of our viewers and our listeners who tune in every week faithfully to listen and watch. And we wish you all the absolutely most beautiful new year. 2020 has been pretty dark and bleak, and so I'm happy for it to come to an end, and looking forward to a new and brighter year with greater and creepier guests.
Same here. Well, thank you everyone very much. Thank you, Chris Rowe, producer of the Chattering Hour, and thank you for everyone for watching. And again, as Chris says, wishing everybody the best for 2021, and we'll be back in a couple of weeks on January the 14th, when I'll be chatting with Lynn Shay. Take care. And until then, be safe and well.